Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove. For all the latest Buckeyes news, analysis, reaction, and the best Ohio State community on the entire internet, head over to BuckeyeGrove.com or follow us on Twitter at Ohio State Rivals. Without any further delay, it's time to get unscripted. Broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Ma! We get some meatloaf?
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Ma! The meatloaf!
Ma, where's that meatloaf? I've been waiting for it. Meatloaf sounds really good right now. Hey, great Monday to you. Welcome back to the Unscripted Ohio podcast. I am your host, Kyle Lamb. Thank you for joining us. We are here by virtue of BuckeyeGrove.com. Hey, so listen, we're going to talk some basketball today and a little hockey talk, like butter, Linda Richmond. I'm not going to talk a lot about hockey today, but, you got to feel the hockey fever in the city of Columbus. The Ohio State men's hockey program clinched its first outright conference title since 1974, 1972, something like that. It's been a long time. I don't have the exact year in front of me, but that's the kind of show prep I'm doing here. But, bottom line is the Ohio State men's hockey team has won the outright Big Ten hockey title, and they, of course, will be the number one seed in the Big Ten conference tournament. And then the Columbus Blue Jackets, with a couple of really big acquisitions this week, getting Matt Duchene from the Ottawa Senators, a big-time center. I know, you probably saw Mark Gibler and I maybe didn't see eye to eye on this on Twitter, but I think he's a big-time center, frontline center anyway. Mark doesn't share that assessment, but regardless, they did acquire Duchene from the Ottawa Senators, and they also acquired Ryan Dzingel, who is also a former Ohio State Buckeye player, Ohio State hockey player. So a couple of separate acquisitions from the Senators. We'll see what happens in the deadline. Will they trade Panarin later today? Artemi Panarin, if you're listening on Monday, it is the trade deadline. Will they trade Panarin? Will they trade Sergei Bobrovsky? Probably not. I don't think so. But I'll talk about that a little bit later. Not real long, but it is hockey fever in the city of Columbus. Ohio State football. If you did not see this, the spring game tickets went on sale on Friday. They are now available. There are still some left, and I imagine they will be available for at least a few more weeks. I don't think they're going to sell out that quickly, even if they do sell out. But they are $5 a piece, and you can get them general admission seats. They were advertising $15 reserved seats, but they were not available when I went online to grab a pair myself. So I don't know if they're still going to be available or not, but you can definitely get $5 general admission seats as I am recording this podcast. So Ohio State spring game, that is Saturday, April the 13th. It is a noon kickoff. I imagine that place is going to be packed, especially if the weather holds up, which, in mid-April in the state of Ohio, you cannot count on the weather to do what it's supposed to do. And I don't even know at that time of the year what it is supposed to do, but you can't count on it in any capacity. So if the weather is nice, if we get a 50, 60-degree day and no threat of rain or snow, which it could snow at that time of year, but if we get a 50, 60-degree day with no precipitation, then I think we're going to see over 100,000 or very, very close to 100,000 people come out, because there is a lot of curiosity to what Justin Fields will do at quarterback. And I think people are going to flock to see them. It's funny because as much interest as there was in 2015 with the quarterback battle coming off the national championship, and as much interest as there was last year in the quarterback battle with Dwayne Haskins and Joe Burrow, even though most people thought that Haskins would probably be the quarterback and Burrow would probably, wind up transferring, there was still a lot of curiosity as to how that would play out. But for as much interest in those two spring games as we saw, I think this one is 10 times more fascinating for Buckeye fans. And there's not even a competition, really. You could say Matthew Baldwin has a chance, maybe a 1% chance of winning the job, but we all know it's going to be Justin Fields at starter this year. And I think it's not even that the Ohio State coaching staff has necessarily made up their mind or given the job to Justin Fields. It's just he is that talented. There's too much upside there to ignore. He will be the starting quarterback. So there is no battle in spring football this year to really pay attention to, but you just want to see Fields suit up in, the scarlet jersey and, see him play for the first time at the Horseshoe. So there will be a lot of people going to the spring game. That should be really interesting. I know I'm curious to see how he does at quarterback for Ohio State. So switching gears now, a little bit of basketball here I want to talk about. Ohio State lost another tough game at Maryland over the weekend, and there is a definite trend here, a pattern that we have seen from the Buckeyes. It's all too familiar, and it happened again, and I'm going to tell you what it is. For 30, 35 minutes, Ohio State looks like a capable, exciting basketball team that shows flashes and shows signs of putting it all together. And just when you start to think, hey, this team is really going to do it now, right? They're going to finally get it. Then something inevitably goes wrong. And it happened actually twice in the Maryland game because it happened around, what was it, the 12-minute mark, I think 12-minute mark. I'd have to go look at the play-by-play. I can't remember the exact time. But, Ohio State fell apart. They just could not score. And then Maryland goes on this run, and next thing you know, slowly the lead balloons out to 16 points. And I got to be honest, I thought the game was over at that point because Ohio State just couldn't get anything going offensively. But to Ohio State's credit, they dug in. They didn't stop playing. I thought Maryland actually got really sloppy running their offense. They helped Ohio State out because they went for a couple daggers, a couple knockout blows. They went, shot some quick three-pointers. And Ohio State capitalized. They didn't stop playing. They went down and they got hot. They started hitting some shots. They started feeling confident. And next thing you know, it gets down to 5. It goes back to 8. It got down to 11, then went back. It got down to 8, went back to 11, and then back down to 5, and then back to 8. And next thing you know, Ohio State goes on another run, and Justin Ahrens hits his huge three-pointer from the corner, and it's a 2-point game. And I'm going to talk more about Ahrens in a few minutes because I have a lot of thoughts. He's been really giving some quality minutes for Ohio State, and he's starting to show a lot of promise for a potentially really good scorer for Ohio State the next couple of years. But I'll get into him in a second. But he hits that corner 3 that gets it down to 2 points, and you got to be honest at that point, there's 5 minutes left in the game, and you're thinking, yeah, Ohio State can actually win this now. This is a real basketball game. But on the ensuing possession, and this is I said it on Twitter, after the game, this was a microcosm not only of the game, but of the Ohio State season. Ohio State plays pretty good defense for, 20, 25 seconds, and next thing you know, Maryland gets a little kick out on the corner to Smith, who is a 25% three-point shooter. And to that point, Ohio State was playing the scouting report correctly because they were shading away from him the entire game when he was on the floor because he was the worst perimeter shooter that Maryland had. Well, what does Justin Ahrens do? He goes flying out on a closeout to try to challenge the shot, and he goes right into the chest of Smith, and Smith gets a foul called, and then goes to the line, hits 3 free throws, and it's back to a 5-point game. Now, the game isn't over at that point, but that is a microcosm of what has happened to Ohio State basketball this season. It's those little plays, and this was the second time that Ohio State had made the run and got back into it, and then they lost it again. And from there on, I'm going to tell you what happened because this is the familiar pattern here with Ohio State. When it got to that point then, especially after that foul, you just got the sense that Ohio State did not know who was going to take over the game. And And you see this so often, and I think this is why we've seen it twice against Michigan State. We've seen it against Maryland. We've seen it against Purdue. We saw it even against Michigan for 30 minutes. I think this is why they can play with teams, but then all of a sudden they fall apart at the end. It's because they start to panic when things go wrong in crunch time, in these tight situations at the end of the game. They don't have a true, I don't want to use the term leader because I don't think that's what it is, but they don't have the true go-to guy, the alpha male that can take the ball and go get a basket. And I think that lack of obvious scorer in crunch time is really hurting them, because you're seeing Luther Muhammad presses, you're seeing Keyshawn Woods press. And by the way, the first half of that game, that was the best Keyshawn Woods has looked since November. That was the Keyshawn Woods that I think Ohio State was hoping to have got when he transferred from Wake Forest. And we saw it early in the year. We saw he played really well early on. One game he had 10 turnover or 10 assists, no turnovers. He was distributing the ball and scoring when they needed to, but he has just not done that in a long time. In the first half, he actually did that. But in the second half, when it was time to need a basket, you see guys start to get out of control. They panic. They stop going away from the offense. And even though Ohio State has struggled with turnovers and they've struggled with shooting consistency, they still, through it all, do a decent job of running an offense when they have the ball in their possession. But they go in these little runs, and it happened again against Maryland, and they start to panic. They force shots. They force, bad passes that lead to turnovers. And the turnovers weren't a problem against Maryland. I think they had only 5 or 6 for the entire game. So they took care of the ball, at least this time around. But it's a common theme, and Ohio State does not have any confidence. And so I think when you see these close games get inside of 5 minutes, they start to force things. And it happened this time. It's happened several times. And I think that's what happens to this team is they don't have the leadership. They don't have the experience. Now, these are things that are going to come. Next year, they're going to have 2 true point guards in the mix, C.J. Walker. I've shared this, I think, before, but look, I'm hearing great reviews about C.J. Walker. He's going to be a facilitator. He's going to be a distributor. He's going to be a settling presence. I think he's going to be a true point guard. People are really going to like him. I think there are going to be moments next year, despite all the hype with DJ Carton, I think you're going to see 2 point guards on the floor at the same time during stretches, because Chris Holtmann is not shy about putting 2 or 3 guards on the floor at the same time. So I think with Walker and Carton, you could see them play together. Carton's going to get a lot of minutes, 25, 30 minutes a game, but don't be surprised if C.J. Walker gets a lot of minutes too. But when you have the true point guard on the floor and then you have more experienced scorers around them, Ohio State basketball next year is in great shape. But the big issue is down the stretch. You see a lot of guys. We finally saw Keyshawn Woods come back alive, at least for one half. The second half, he didn't score. He struggled a little bit more in the second half, but I thought he at least showed more poise and better decision-making. And some of that may have been he knew he had to step up with C.J. Jackson, not playing this game. And I think that kind of helped his confidence and helped his flow a little bit, because he knew his team really needed him, and he's got to play like that the rest of the season. But they need Luther Muhammad to be better. I mean, look, I was singing his praise a few weeks ago because he was starting to break out, and remember, there was a time when he was second in the Big Ten in shooting, and it wasn't that long ago. It was a couple of weeks ago, but he has since then he's been a disaster. He can't make a basket to save his life, and he is just out of control right now. I think success for Luther at midseason may have been a disaster in disguise, okay? Because he got that confidence so much. I think he thought the game was going to come to him a little bit quicker and a little bit easier than it actually came. And now he's forcing, with that extra confidence, he's forcing things a little too much. I think he senses where his team is at, where the psyche is at, not having that go-to scorer that I spoke of. And I honestly think it's him pressing now, trying to be that guy, and it's just not working. And we're seeing silly turnovers and some really bad shots. Remember, there was that one in the second half. He drove right baseline, tried to beat his guy around, around the corner, and he ran out of space, and he just threw up this wild reverse prayer that just went like 10 feet up in the air and just, completely whiffed on everything. That's the kind of shot attempt that we've seen a little too frequently from him recently. And I think it's, again, these guys are losing poise, and when crunch time comes, the clock gets under 5 minutes, all of a sudden, all the offense that they've been running goes away, and they just start throwing up bad shots. And that's guys trying to force the issue a little too much. They're panicking when they get down by 5-6 points. It just gets away from them because they completely abandon the offense. But next year, I don't think that's going to be a problem. I think Luther is going to be better. I think Dwayne's going to be better. Dwayne Washington is going to, Dan Dockett said on the broadcast he thinks that, Washington has a chance to be a 15 to 18 point scorer in the future. I think that's true. But the individual flashes are there. You see it game to game. You see stretches where you see the talent from Muhammad. You see the talent from Washington. Kyle Young is a great all-around player. He's not the scorer that they need right now, but he does the little things. You've seen flashes from Jallo. Caleb Wesson really struggled against Bruno Fernando on Saturday. Let me tell you, by the way, and I know people are very frustrated with how he performed against Fernando, how he's performed against some other bigs. Bruno Fernando, in my opinion, is going to be an NBA All-Star. That guy, he's 6'10". He's got legitimate inside-outside skill. He's a great passer for his position, for his size. He's a good offensive rebounder. I think he's, averaging 11 rebounds a game, like 4 or 5 offensively. He is going to, in my opinion, he's a lottery pick and going to be a really good NBA player. And I know he bullied Caleb on Saturday. Don't get me wrong. That was ugly. Caleb really struggled with him, but I like that Fernando kid a lot. And I agree with, the sentiment Dockett said about Fernando is that somehow if he comes back to Maryland next year, they are going to be a really, really good team on paper. They could join the likes of, Michigan, possibly Ohio State, possibly Iowa. There are some potentially really good teams in the Big Ten next year. I don't know if the depth is going to be as good, but I think at the top could actually potentially, if a guy like Fernando comes back to Maryland, they could be just as good at the top in this league next year. But anyhow, going back, I know Caleb has struggled. I understand, we've seen it from him, though, against some good players. He really took it to Nick Ward in the first meeting. So it's not that he can't go up against a really good player and play well, but he's got to be more consistent. And some of it is not his fault. Teams are really going at him with double teams, triple teams. They're being physical with him before he gets touches. You got to understand it's not all his fault. Now, he can play better, and he definitely got dominated on Saturday by Fernando. But I'm going back to this and to this point that I'm trying to make, and you really see stretches where these guys are really good, and it just all falls apart. But so I want to talk about Justin Ahrens because here are some. I saw some interesting stats on this. Ahrens first. Let's call a spade here. To some degree, Ahrens has been playing out of necessity. He's been playing because, C.J. Jackson was hurt the other day, although that's not why he played. He was kind of taking Musa Jallo's minutes in that case. But there has been times where he has played because Ohio State needed him to, and they didn't have any other options. They've had injuries. When Luther was out a couple weeks, he played because of that. There are mitigating circumstances as to why he's on the floor, but he has also earned extra minutes. He played 26 minutes on Saturday because A, he gave them an offensive option they don't have, and B, his defense has improved. After the game, I saw Chris Holtman really praised Justin Ahrens' defense, and I think there are 2 reasons he did this, okay? I think number 1 is I think he's trying to continue to play the psychology motivator. I think that the coaching staff is extremely happy with how hard and how well Ahrens has progressed. He really is a guy that busts tail every day in practice. He's worked hard on his defense. He's gone from, he was kind of a liability on defense early in the year to, maybe defense neutral. He's not an asset yet, but because he gives max effort and because he's out there working hard on scouting report defense, knowing the players that are on the floor for the opposing team and reading plays correctly, that's a big, big asset. You can overcome some of your limitations on defense. You may not be the quickest in moving your feet. You may not be the strongest in holding your ground on somebody trying to post you up or penetrate and push your body back. But if you know the scouting report, you can take some of these things away before they happen. And I think Ahrens has done a great job improving scouting report defense. And I think that's got the coaching staff really having a lot more faith in his ability. But I said this, when he came in, look, I know people had this perception that he was a shooter. And don't get me wrong, he's got a nice stroke. He's got a quick release. He's got a potential to be a really, really good shooter at this level. But in high school, he was more of a volume shooter than an efficient shooter. But he also had the ability to really be a really good passer, a really good scorer, a pretty good rebounder. And these things are starting to slowly manifest themselves as he's gotten more comfortable and he's gotten more playing time within the system. The other day, he had 3 3-pointers, 9 points, 4 rebounds, a couple steals, a block. And if you look at his numbers this season, he's played 136 minutes. And here's what's really impressive. When you extrapolate those 136 minutes to 40 minutes a game, and in reality, you're never going to play 40 minutes a game on average. That's why some of these totals are sometimes, they're sometimes extracted to, 35, 36 minutes a game because a really good player might play 36 minutes. Most players are going to play 30, 32 minutes. But let's just say in this case, for 40 minutes a game, his season totals this year are really impressive. He is 11.2 points per game, 6.8 rebounds per game, 1.2 assists, 1.5 steals, and just shy of 1 block a game. That's in 40 minutes this year on average. The one downside is he's averaging almost 3 turnovers in 40 minutes. So you look at his stats in limited playing time, and he's certainly had some level of production when he's in there. The coaches seem to be relying on him more. They seem to trust him more. Getting 26 minutes the other day against Maryland, I thought was a real indication of where he sits with the coaching staff. And I'm just really, I think he's a guy that Ohio State fans need to be excited about. I think he's showing a lot of potential. He's really come around. Before you know it, I think Justin Ahrens all of a sudden has gone from a guy where I think a lot of people expected he would never last at Ohio State, would probably transfer out after the year. Maybe next year, I think he would, I thought there was a perception out there, right or wrong, that he might get lost in the rotation and just not wind up being a factor at Ohio State. But I think these last several games, we're seeing a guy that can really develop and be a consistent mainstay in that rotation. So Justin Ahrens, great game against Maryland. Look, that play where he committed the foul on the 3-point shooter, stuff like that, that's a youthful mistake. That'll get better. And it's a microcosm of this whole team. It's not just Justin Ahrens. It's the whole team. But these things will get better with time, with experience. But it'll be interesting to see these guys develop because, as I said, next year they're going to have the point guard. They're going to have the distributors. And I think suddenly you add in Ahrens, Muhammad, Washington, Young, Jallo. You throw in E.J. Liddell and Alonzo Gaffney. Scoring is not going to be the issue next year. They're going to have that on the floor. But it's there right now. We're seeing flashes. We're just not seeing it put together at once. You see this guy in one game, this guy in another game. There are a lot of different guys on this Ohio State basketball team that can score. They just can't seem to do it at the same time. It's perplexing. Look, it's almost March. It's February 25th. As this is out here on Monday. So it's probably not going to happen this year. It's probably just too late for it all to be put together. But all I need to do is get a couple guys hot at the same time, carry them down the stretch, get into the tournament, and you just never know. You could play your way into the second weekend, and I think Ohio State fans would be more than thrilled to see that happen.
Stretch runtime here at Unscripted Ohio. Kick up your feet as we cross the finish line with the Buckeye Beat, the latest in Ohio State news and notes.
Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
So today's Buckeye Beat is going to be the Blue Jackets beat. Look, I don't want to talk a lot of hockey here, but this is just something that I thought interests me. I hope it'll interest you too. There are a lot of Reds and Indians fans listening to the podcast, so you could probably relate to this kind of topic because the Blue Jackets are in an interesting situation as we decide we wait and see whether they're going to trade Artemi Panarin, whether they're going to trade Sergei Bobrovsky. I don't know why I cannot say that. I might as well just say Bob. I'm going to stop saying Bobrovsky because it's just a tongue twister for me. So I'm going to say Bob. We wait and see if they trade those guys today. I don't think they're going to. But this is such an interesting scenario because you have Panarin and Bob, not potential, they are unrestricted free agents after the season. And then you have Matt Duchene, who they just acquired. He's an unrestricted free agent after the season. Dzingel is an unrestricted free agent. So now you've got a situation where the Blue Jackets have acquired two very good scoring guys that can help the Blue Jackets down the stretch. But now the future is even more uncertain because they've got 4 guys potentially that could walk at the end of the year. So I ask you this, Reds fans and Indians fans, you can relate to this because both teams are small market franchises that have a development system like the Blue Jackets. Major League Baseball and National Hockey League are a little bit alike in that they develop prospects. So it's a little bit different than the NBA. It's a lot different than the NFL. You can't really, in the NFL, you can get younger and you can develop, but you're learning on the job. You're drafting draft picks to come in and play right away. So the long-term process isn't as long in the NFL or the NBA as maybe Major League Baseball or the NHL. In this case, Columbus is in a unique position because I hear this all the time. And so this is an interesting question. If you're the Blue Jackets, should you be gambling the way they gambled? Using up the draft picks that they used in the Duchene trade, the Dzingel trade, they gave up a pair of second-round picks. Duchene, they actually gave up a first round and potential second first round, but that's conditional based on signing Duchene long term. So I say go for it. And the reason I say that, look, the Blue Jackets have not won a playoff series yet. And that is the reason some people will say you got to walk before you can crawl. You got to win the series. You can't go mortgaging your future to try to win when you haven't even won a playoff series. I say it has been 18 years Columbus has not won a playoff series. Don't you think it's time to no longer have the status quo? This is why, for me, I am thrilled to death as a Blue Jackets fan to see what Columbus is doing right now with these trades. I think it is awesome that they have finally said, you know what, we're going to do something risky. We know it's risky, but we're going to go for it. We're going to go all in and try to win now. And I think, in 2 games, it's a very small sample, but with Matt Duchene in the rotation there at the, on the front line with Panarin and Atkinson, this team has looked energized. They've outscored Calgary, or they've outscored Ottawa and San Jose, who had been playing really well. They've outscored them 7-0 in 2 games. They look energized. Bob looks a lot better all of a sudden, 2 shutouts in a row. I think this team can, I know Tampa Bay is out there who is just killing everybody right now, especially Columbus. They've outscored Columbus, I think, 21-2 in 3 games or something like that. I know Tampa is out there and nobody wants to play them, but I say this is a team right now, all of a sudden with these extra additions that look like they can go the distance. They're good enough to go the distance. And I'm not saying that you should get excited and get your hopes up for, a Stanley Cup championship, but I'm just saying that suddenly the outlook is there. There's a lot of excitement. I'm glad the Blue Jackets are going for it. I say it's time to stop the status quo, and you got to take a risk. You're never going to win anything if you don't take a risk. When the opportunity is there, when the window is there, you have to go all in. And I think the Blue Jackets are in a better position because they feel like they've got a real chance of signing Duchesne to a long-term extension. And if that happens, you can withstand the losses of Bob and especially Panarin. And that's not to say, who's to say that if they do sign Duchesne and they get really hot in the playoffs and they go a long way and the team meshes together, who's to say Panarin won't decide to stay? My understanding of the cap is that they have enough room that they could sign Duchesne and Panarin long-term if they wanted to, if both guys were willing to do that. I don't know if that's going to happen. It's too soon to say, but right now, I'm saying just go for it, and that's what the Blue Jackets appear to be doing. They're not going to trade Panarin today unless they get blown away with an offer, and that's all I can ask. Win now, see what you can do in the playoffs, let the offseason take care of itself. But I'm really excited about the Blue Jackets. I'm going to go over tomorrow night. Tuesday, the Blue Jackets are hosting Pittsburgh. The Penguins, as of right now, are not even in the playoffs, which is interesting. Now, they're real close. They're only like a point behind the Jackets. So there's a small margin of separation between Columbus and Carolina and Pittsburgh. And then actually there's not that big of a gap between Columbus and Washington and the Islanders ahead of them. So the Metro is very interesting right now. Any of these teams could fall from first or second all the way to fifth or sixth, or vice versa. They could climb from fifth to third to second. So huge games down the stretch here for Columbus, who will play Pittsburgh 3 times over the next couple of weeks. So Blue Jackets fans, this is really exciting. I say enjoy the moment while it lasts. I know there's the fear of, is Bread gone after the year? Probably. But enjoy this while it lasts. If they can get Duchesne re-signed with or without Panarin, I think that changes the momentum of the franchise at least a little bit, and there will be a lot to look forward to in the future. So that's going to wrap things up now for the podcast. I appreciate you sticking with me here and talking a little hockey. I thought this was fun. We said when the podcast began that it was Unscripted Ohio for a reason. We wanted to be flexible enough to throw in some sports talk of the Ohio pro sports franchises every once in a while. And Blue Jackets buzz, the fever is catching up as we get into March and get closer to playoff time. So, we'll see what the CBJ can do. I hope that they hold on to Panarin and Bob today and make an all-out run for the playoffs, but it should be very interesting. Anyway, that's going to do it for the show. You can catch me on Twitter at KYLam8. You can catch the show every Monday and Friday here on BuckeyeGrove.com. We are also on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. Coming up Wednesday, listen to Johnny and Corey with the Scarlet and Great podcast, and I will be back on Friday. Appreciate the listen, everybody. Have a great week.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.